Years ago, I walked into a UPS store to get some handouts printed for a workshop. I needed 35 sets, there were 13 pages per handout, and they cost 9 cents each to print. After doing the printing, the staff member used a calculator and said, the total is $2.50. I went, that can't be right. If they're 13 per handout and they're 10 cents each, that's got to be $1.30 per handout. And because there's 35 of them, it must be around $40, I thought, and I said to her. So she quickly grabbed a calculator again and said, oh, that'd be $81.90. Now, I said, again, that can't be right. But this is a perfect example of why number sense is important. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to get your students estimating, approximating, and judging reasonableness. Before we get into this, I want to briefly explain the unique roles that estimation, approximation, and judging reasonableness each play in developing number sense. Estimation is about quantity. It's about making a sensible guess when you don't need an exact answer, or maybe it's not even possible to have an exact answer. Approximation is about measurement. That's when we express values of length, area, capacity, or time that are close, but they're not perfect. And judging reasonableness, that's about sense making. That's when you ask yourself, does that make sense? Does my answer make sense? Now, all these three habits serve to develop flexible thinkers as they balance precision with practicality. Now, let's take a look at estimation. When we estimate, we reason about how much or how many without actually having to count everything or to compute exactly. Now, this act of reasoning develops number sense as students compare, group, or mentally adjust quantities. Good number sense involves knowing when an exact answer is needed versus knowing when an estimate will do. Helping students understand the difference between the two will build their confidence in their own thinking as they learn that they won't always use mathematics to be exact. They'll sometimes use mathematics to be close enough. Unfortunately, we all know that students like to give exact answers, and I think that's because they have a fear of being wrong. So we need activities that are inviting or at least force the students to estimate. So I want to show you a couple of activities from my number sense and mental computation series that either do not require an exact answer or make it, just by the way they're structured, extremely difficult or impossible to give an exact answer. Take a look at this activity. There are 25 grey buttons. How many buttons in all? Now, they could still count each button, but it's structured in a way to increase their chances of them seeing that the grey buttons is about 1/3 of the total. So they just multiply by 3 to say there are about 75 buttons. But take a look at this activity. These seeds are spread fairly evenly over the grid, and part of the grid has been covered. Now, the covered area forces the students to use a strategy for estimating the total number of seeds. The grid serves as a foundation for the strategies. And while there are many, I'd be happy if my students said there are about 4 seeds in each box and there are 20 boxes in all, including the covered ones. So I estimate there are about 80 seeds in all. I really like that activity, and I have decreased and increased the complexity of the grids for younger or older students. Here's another example. Now let's look at approximations. An approximation brings measurement into play, so it really provides an experience that is more real world for students. Now, when we approximate, we are expressing values that are close enough to get the job done and reasonable given what we can observe or even measure. This is where a personal referent becomes a powerful tool. For me, I've always pictured a 30 centimetre ruler, or in old terms a 12-inch ruler. So for small lengths at least, if this was 5 rulers long in my mind, I would know that that is about 1.5 metres. And for capacity, I always picture a 1 litre of milk. I've used it all my life. I've got a good mental image of that. That's my personal reference for capacity. And for mass, it's a tub or a butter or margarine. This is 500 grams. So I got a good feel of what half a kilogram is. Now these are all my measurement anchors. They help me make informed approximations when I don't need an exact answer, or I simply don't have the tools I need to do the actual measuring. The level of precision, or the unit of measure that we need, really depends on the situation. If I'm describing a journey that goes interstate, an hour or two either way really doesn't matter. It's really just to give you a sense of the length of the journey. But we're providing an approximation of how long it will take to ride my bike to the store, then suddenly minutes matter. Take a look at this activity. If stack A has 50 coins, estimate the number of coins in each stack. I use the term estimate purely to simplify the reading level for the students, but they are really making approximations involving non-standard units of length, which in this case is the thickness of a coin. I want you to notice how the fine detail in the images prevents students from counting. Now, as I've provided the length of stack A as being 50 coins high, they can then use that to provide an approximate of the height of the other stacks. Stack B looks about half the height. Stack C is probably half as high again, which makes it 75 coins high, and so on. After the students have approximations for all the stacks, I have them figure out some values. Judging reasonableness applies to any situation. It could be solving a calculation, checking someone else's work, or looking at a graph or data display and thinking, that's not quite right. It's about stepping back and asking, does that make sense? This is where number sense meets critical thinking. When students develop this habit, they move beyond performing procedures to truly thinking mathematically. They start to sense that something is off, a misplaced decimal, a total that's too great, or data that simply doesn't align. And they use reasoning rather than rules to fix it. Here are 2 activities that I think you might like. I would always do cloze activities when teaching English in my class. That's where you remove certain words from a small paragraph and the students need to rewrite those words from a list to make the message make sense. Well, as you can see here, we can do the same thing with mathematics. We need to include these numbers in the sentences below so they make sense. Gemma bought a certain number of ice creams. We should know from our experience that this number will be a whole number. She paid a certain number each which totaled X amount. I think she bought 4 ice creams and she paid $1.95 each. I won't do the remainder of the exercise, but I hope you agree it requires a student to judge the reasonableness of each number. The last activity I want to show you has been adapted from this book. It requires the students to place a decimal point in each sentence to make it make sense. So it requires them to make a judgment on what is reasonable. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Now I know the price of eggs have been on the increase lately, but I don't think they would cost $680. And $68 sounds too much too. I would think they're only $6.80, but that does sound too cheap. And look at the road trip. I know I can't spend 85 hours a day in a car, so it must be wrong. It's possible that it could show 85 hundredths of an hour, but an hour is 60 minutes. So what does 85 hundredths of an hour even look like? It is more reasonable to believe that they spent 8.5 or 8.5 hours driving each day. Well, that's a wrap. Estimation, approximation, and judging reasonableness all work together to build number sense. So this is what I want you to do. 1. Remember, we estimate when we don't need an exact quantity. We approximate when we don't need to or can't measure. And we judge reasonableness to make sure the situation makes sense. And 2, download copies of my activities using the link below and try them with your students. And be sure to get them talking and sharing their strategies. And finally, if you've seen value in this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share and subscribe today so you never miss another learning opportunity with me. See you next time.